Hello and welcome to the second Improve Your Chess video, and I'll be talking about more chess mistakes to avoid in your own games. So this is a game that I played with the black pieces against my friend John, and as we can see here, he actually had a lead here in the game until he got in trouble and let me take over. So we'll see what happened. I played at an 86.6% accuracy rating versus their 72.2. Neither one of us had any brilliant or great moves, but let's look at the bad moves here. So it looks like my opponent had 5 inaccuracies versus my 2, 4 mistakes versus my 1. We each had 1 missed opportunity and no blunders in the game. All right, so this game was a hippo defense. So let me turn on the analysis and we'll see what happened here. Okay, so my opponent began with e4, a good solid opening move. Allows your bishop and your queen to be activated. So the hippo defense, it's basically a double fianchetto opening. So I try to fianchetto my bishop on both sides. So knight to c3, another good opening move, developing one of the knights. And then I play bishop to bishop to b7. And now knight to f3, another good opening move. And the game continues with g6 here. Now, the computer gives me an inaccuracy because it doesn't really like the hippo defense because you're moving a lot of pawns. I'll end up moving my b pawn, my g pawn, the e and the d pawn, and even maybe the h and a pawns, and all of them will usually end up on this third rank. So the computer doesn't necessarily like that, but the hippo defense can confuse your opponent sometimes. So here, a good lesson to be learned by this move. Why is this an inaccuracy? Well, we see the computer recommends d4 instead, which is a better move because this move d3, a mistake to avoid is blocking in your own pieces. So now this bishop is blocked in and it's a bad bishop. If d4 would have been played, the bishop would have more room to develop. White would take a bigger share of the center. So if your opponent is going to let you control the center, you might as well go ahead and do that. So I continue with bishop to g7 here. So my bishops are attacking the center of the board from the edges here. And now bishop to e3. So the computer says this is an inaccuracy. And once again, it shows how important it would have been to move this pawn here to d4 instead. Because usually you don't want to, another mistake to avoid is moving pieces or pawns more than once in the opening unless you have a good reason, unless you're capturing something or recapturing something your opponent captured. But we see the importance of this d4 pawn move, that the computer recommends that the best move would be to move this pawn again up to d4 here. So the game continues with e6. And as I said, the computer doesn't like these kind of moves. It recommends that I play d5, fighting for the center. So finally, my opponent plays d4. But now the computer doesn't like that. Having moved a piece twice in the opening, it recommends just moving this pawn to h4 and immediately starting an attack here on the h-file. Because more than likely my king will want to castle there. Although queenside castling can be an option in the hippo defense, or no castling at all. All right, moving on. I play d6, continuing to set up the hippo defense. And now, queen to e2. The computer says this is a good move, but better would have been bishop to d3. Because another mistake to avoid is getting your pieces clustered up where they kind of block each other. And I myself have this problem sometimes where I place my pieces on squares where they kind of get in each other's way. So now this bishop cannot develop here because the queen is blocking it. And the queen may have been better here on d2 to create a battery and maybe threaten to try and exchange off the dark squared bishop here. So a mistake to avoid is do not block your pieces and let them get in the way of each other. Better would have been bishop to d3 to develop the bishop first and then worry about where to put this queen. All right, so knight to e7 is played, and another inaccuracy here, moving a piece twice in the opening. As I said, it's better to get all your pieces developed, get your king castled to safety before you start moving pieces again and trying to attack. So this is an inaccuracy. Once again, h4 is recommended by the computer to immediately try and get some kind of play against the king side. Now, I return the favor here with a mistake. So why is this a mistake? Well, it looks like the computer believes it's better to just exchange here in the middle and open things up. Maybe because my opponent is still in the center, although he can quickly castle to the queen side here. And because I was still in the center, I didn't want to open things up. And I wanted to play a more strategical game instead of tactics right away until I get the rest of my pieces developed. But the computer recommends instead of d5 to capture here, saying that is best, and that would give black a slight edge. And then one possibility is to recapture, but then I could start piling up knight to c6, knight to d7, and start adding pressure to this bishop here, or excuse me, to this pawn with my bishop. They would have to defend maybe with their bishop at some point. They could castle and maybe pin my knight to the queen if my knight moves here. So I didn't want to have to worry about all that yet, and that's the reason I didn't exchange in the center. The computer even recommends after this to go ahead and castle queenside immediately with a threat of a discovered attack on the queen here. So in this move, the recommendation is to just go ahead and attack the knight, something like this, and then after g4, knight to g5, then you can develop your other knight to help attack this pawn. You don't want to play f5 or the knight could swing in here and attack the queen possibly. All right, so let's get back to more mistakes to avoid. So I close the position up because I'm not ready to open things up because I haven't finished development. My king's not castled yet. So queen to b5, a missed opportunity. So why is this a missed opportunity? Well, queen to d2 is better. You kind of move the queen out of the way of this bishop that needs to develop, and you create a battery with a threat of trading off this bishop, which could easily be met by h6, but then it would be harder for me. I wouldn't want to castle to the king side, or the bishop could swoop in and capture this pawn once my rook is no longer protecting the h pawn after I castle king side. So queen to b5 is played. Once again, moving a piece again in the opening before you've castled. So probably better would have been castling, or queen to d2, which presents a threat here to black. I could ignore it, just castle anyway, but then they would be able to exchange off my bishop and create a weakness around my king side. So Next was knight to d7, just developing and blocking the threat here. And now we have a mistake. Bishop to g5. So moving a piece again in the opening before everything is developed. Remember, do not do that. So here, c5 is recommended, but instead I attack. This is a missed opportunity. It would have been better to play a6 and attack the queen immediately. So, there is a possibility of my opponent jumping in here as well. And I could capture and then attack here. But, this is not recommended. Anyway, I had a missed opportunity. I should have immediately chased the queen. And now we have a capture, so exchange of material here. But this does help me develop my queen after I recapture. And now a mistake here. So now this castling to the queen side is a mistake. Let's see if we can figure out what would have been better. Well, it looks like queen to a4 would have been better. That way, if I try and chase the queen has already moved back, and we'll have some time to escape. Perhaps push this pawn, bring the queen back. But anyway, the game moves on with a6, and now this is good, but c5 would have been better to immediately attack in the center. So queen does retreat to a4, but now the computer says that queen to d3 would have been better, centralizing the queen instead of placing the queen on the edge of the board here, which could allow me to push forward here and chase that queen even more. What does the computer recommend? As I said, queen to d3. So next we have castling. The computer still likes this c5 move. And now another mistake. So why is this move a mistake? Take a look at it. Well, it's attacking my queen, but it allows me to go ahead and capture and wreck the pawns here on the queen side, creating long-term weaknesses. So, of course, the best move is just to go ahead and capture. Now, better here would have been what? Knight to e2. To move this knight, help protect the pawn in the center, maybe getting ready to reposition over to the king side, and perhaps allowing a pawn push here to c4 and put some pressure on the center. All right. I capture, which is the best move, wrecking these pawns, and now there are isolated doubled pawns on the edge of the board here, which will be long-term weaknesses. So my opponent responds with, or excuse me, after my opponent responded with a recapture of the queen, I finally push this c5 move, and it still is the best here. So we have g4 being played, which the computer says is excellent, but knight to b1 would have been better to go ahead and protect this pawn, because my rook could move over at some point and my bishop could threaten to jump out here and target this pawn. So, what does this move do? It does start pushing forward, trying to gain some space on the king side, but after capture, now this pawn is open. So it looks like knight to e2 would have been a better move, keeping this pawn protected. And now knight takes e5 is played, although rook at a to c8, targeting this unprotected piece, is recommended. Although I wanted to open up this diagonal for my bishop, and the computer says this is still an excellent move, and I'm targeting this pawn. Rook to g1 would have been better. So, another mistake to avoid. Watch out for unprotected pieces and pawns, and especially the king as well, look out for checks. So mistakes to avoid: do not just give away your pawns, because now after this move, I can just jump over here and snatch up this pawn. I'm threatening this other pawn. So my opponent finds the best move. So this kind of surprised me a little bit. I was not expecting this move to be played. So good job on my opponent, John, for finding this best move, sacrificing the knight, and kind of opening up a little bit of an attack. So if you're behind in material, you usually don't want to exchange more material. But, he was trying to get some kind of counterplay going. So I capture, and the computer says that that is not best, that rook at A to E8 would have been better. So rook at A to E8, attacking, and now let's see, knight to A4 is recommended, allowing me to go ahead and capture. Anyway, in the game, I accept the knight sacrifice, but it allows the rook to capture and fork these two pawns. So I go ahead and stop that fork, but now this unprotected bishop is under attack. So I protect. The bishop adds pressure to this pawn along with the knight. So I go ahead and add protection, although computer recommends, let's see here, instead capturing and targeting the bishop. So anyway, the rooks are doubled up here, which is usually something that you would like to do. But my opponent has to watch out. I'm ahead by +3 in material, the equivalent of 3 pawns. What do I have? An extra bishop here. So we have 5 pawns versus 5, and I just have an extra dark squared bishop here. And I'm targeting this. So once again, my opponent should probably have tried to protect this knight here. Recommended is H3 to counterattack, but then I could just attack here, grabbing this pawn. Maybe the rook would attack me. But anyway, we have this move, and the best thing to do is snatch up a piece here. So now I'm ahead 2 pieces, and it's starting to look pretty grim, and I'm attacking here. So my opponent, behind in material, decides to trade off more material. So another mistake to avoid: do not trade off your pieces when you're behind in material. Try to trade pawns off instead. Now, why is that? Well, if you trade down all the pawns, then there's a threat, there's no longer a threat of them promoting to a queen, and it's harder to checkmate if you were able to trade off most of the pieces, and I would just be ahead, let's see, a knight and a bishop, so knight and bishop at the end, and it would be a little more difficult to checkmate with a knight and bishop. It's that's a pretty tough checkmate, and it takes many moves, and if I'm not able to checkmate, it could end up a draw with the 50 move rule. So I'm glad to trade off material. He puts me under check. I move here to avoid a fork of the king and the bishop. So now the bishop is under attack. I protect. It looks like it would have been better to do what there? Just move the bishop. But then they would be able to attack this pawn. So my knight is under attack. And here I make a little mistake. I kind of moved too quickly. I thought, I can deliver a checkmate here. But then after I move this, I realize, wait a minute. Once he captures this, his bishop can move back and block the checkmate. So better here would have been H5 instead. So, if that move is played and they try and attack, and this is why I didn't play that move, because I thought, well, they can just attack and my knight will be pinned to the rook, but then I can just move over here and threaten this mate again, and it would be, well, pretty much maybe impossible to stop it by then. All right. So in the game, we had capture. I go for the mate, but then, I realize that, it's not possible. So they block, they only move, and then I have to go back and protect this bishop. So my opponent just pushes this pawn forward, and I stop the pawns and limit the scope of his bishop. So then the bishop attacks here. I just move forward, allowing a check, so it probably would have been better to go right here. Now this is under attack, but I'm able to go up and protect with the rook. And so the game just continues with a further attack on my bishop. So I just move. And now this move is played, which is kind of keeping your rook active by attacking, but I can just push forward. And now this is not a good move. So another mistake to avoid is do not place your rook somewhere where it'll be inactive, because I see he's trying to attack again, but all I have to do is move my bishop, and this is the best move. And now this rook is kind of inactive here. It just has to retreat. What does he do now? So the game continued with my king moving up, and I'm threatening an attack here. My opponent does still have this blocking move. So the king moves to the center, an inaccuracy. It looks like even if my opponent moved bishop to d1, it would have been a mate in 7, but this allows an immediate mate in 1. So I'm able to just go here and checkmate. So even if my opponent picked this blocking move, well, then what do we do? It looks like the mate in 7 is rook to e1, pinning this bishop. And then, let's see, the best thing to do is rook to e7, where you just give up your rook. So if something like, I don't know, maybe they go after this, well, that allows rook to g7. You just protect. And then what is the threat here? Well, it looks like the threat is moving this over. So rook to e7 is the best move. And now we can't move up here and target this. So this does give a little escape for, well, not an escape, because black is still behind in material by a bishop, but their king is trapped. And so, what would be best now? Looks like rook back to e1, trying to trade off more material. So the best thing to do is capture, and then, like I said, a mistake to avoid is don't trade down more material when you're behind, unless it's pawns. All right. Well, I will end the game there. How did this game end? With this position, a bishop and rook checkmate. Please feel free to leave any comments. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for those that haven't already. And have a super chess day.